Welcome to our next episode of After Hours with Annie. Today, we're talking all about the rise of GLP-1 medications and the impact on holistic health. My name's Bucirde. I'm the resident sexologist at Anni.
I'm a clinical nutritionist, also at Anni as a Wellbeing growth advisor.
And hello again, I'm Anna, one of the founders of Anni, and yeah, super excited for this one today. Can't wait to hear about GLP-1s.
This is an episode I've been wanting to do for a really long time because I've always been really fascinated by this topic. And I feel like there's so much conversation happening around the medication of GLP-1s. And we're really excited to kind of delve into this, especially with Erica's point of view. And it's going to be a really great episode. So I guess for the first question, can you explain what a GLP-1 is and how it works?
Absolutely, great question. So what are they?
What is it?
They actually have quite an interesting mechanism of action. So it is quite complicated, but to simplify it down, it's GLP-1 agonists stand for glucagon like peptide 1, so GLP-1. And they have this incretin hormone effect, which was originally observed in the 1970s. And incretin just means increased insulin. And so there was this hormone that was observed, and we realized this is increasing insulin. This could be really, really helpful, especially for people with type 2 diabetes. And so, more research kind of went under, and these GLP-1s have now kind of hit the market. And what they do is they enhance insulin secretion. So there's more insulin circulating around the body. They suppress the opposing hormone, which is glucagon. So there's less glucagon cycling around the body. It also delays gastric emptying or slows that down. And then it activates the satiety centers in the brain, which is where people in the brain stem. And that is directly linked to the vagus nerve. And so that is where these people get these appetite suppressions. And a lot of people report hearing less food noise when they're on these. And that's because it's directly linking and hitting those neurons in those brainstem centers.
Is food noise like, I'm hungry, I want a snack, I want to eat something? What does food noise mean?
Look, I actually haven't had that. It's something that's reported to people. So I imagine it's something where these people are reporting that it's like being on one radio station and they're just hearing this same song at the same frequency and it's super loud. And then all of a sudden they're on these GLP-1 medications and there's not just the same song anymore. They can hear everything else that's going on around them. So I imagine it would be quite liberating for people who have had that food noise over the years. Yeah.
Fascinating.
I know.
Yeah, really interesting.
Other things. Yeah, amazing.
So it was originally developed for type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is where we see persistently high blood glucose, and that happens over a period of time. It doesn't just happen overnight. So what happens is the body either stops responding to insulin. So there's a lot of insulin flying around, but the receptors that open the gate to let glucose in, responding to insulin, they are muted, or the receptors aren't working, and we call that insulin resistance. Or it's a result of too much insulin, of the body not secreting enough insulin. And so these drugs were developed to stop that. Originally, the first iterations of these drugs didn't actually see the weight loss that we're now seeing with the Ozempics, the Mounjaros. So the semaglutides and the tirzepatides, when they hit the market, the weight loss that came along with them, we just had never seen before. You're talking about 16%, I think, weight loss with Ozempic. Is that right? 14.9 with Ozempic or Wegovy. So they're the semaglutides. And then you're looking at 21% with the tirzepatides. And there's now a triple agonist on the market that's being studied. And that one is looking more like 24%.
Insane, isn't it? That's
insane. It's huge. A lot. It's huge weight loss that we just haven't seen. And normally weight loss drugs have been a bit of a like, oh, we don't want to go near them, because previously there's been a lot of dangers associated with cardiovascular risk or stroke risk. And so any of these drugs, even though it feels like they only hit the market yesterday, they've actually been around for quite a while and been tested, and they have to go through the stroke and cardiovascular risk assessment.
And so why, Erica, would you need to take a drug as opposed to being able to or can you even stimulate GLP-1 naturally? Is that something that you can do through food or I'm not sure. magic as a nutritionist, or is it?
No, great question. And there is a lot on social media about people saying, just eat these foods. It's a natural GLP-1 enhancer. And I think it's really important to discern between a pharmacological effect and a physiological effect. A physiological effect is just what our body does naturally. And so, yes, we can stimulate that with food. And initially in the early stages of developments of the drugs, they had a really short half-life. So they turned off the inhibitor, DPP-4, and they saw that they could increase circulating GLP by 3-fold, but we didn't see the weight loss. And food is similar. You can increase it a bit and you might get 1-fold, 2-fold increase. But what these drugs are doing, and now that they've stabilized them, these semaglutides and tirzepatides, they're 1,000 to 10,000 times your natural body's hormones.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you just can't replicate that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So like looking at it as a tool, right? Looking at it, this drug as a tool and a toolkit for people. But, you know, talking about the importance of building a healthy lifestyle, whether you're on or off the drugs, and the importance of like a holistic approach. Would you look at it like a tool in your toolkit? 100%.
I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. I'm not for these drugs and I'm not anti these drugs. You know, and my role as a clinical nutritionist is to support you in your decision making. So, you know, whether you come to me on them or whether you choose not to, and if this is something that is, you know, in your wheelhouse because you maybe are suffering obesity or you do have type 2 diabetes, then, and that's a drug you want to explore, then that's something you do with your GP. But when you come and see me, whether you are or not, it doesn't affect how I would treat you. You know, when you're on them, I would say we still need to make sure you have habitual change. You need to focus on making sure you're eating enough protein, making sure you're doing the resistance training, because you're not going to feel hungry. And potentially this drug isn't a one size fits all. Some people won't want to be on it. Some people won't be able to afford to stay on it. And you still have to have that habitual change. You still need to work on the habits around a healthy lifestyle, so that if and when you choose to come off them, you haven't lost as much muscle, and you've got the habits in change to not get that rebound weight. So if you're on them, we do see that you can lose up to 39 to 40% of your total weight lost is lean mass. And to put that into perspective, when people lose weight, they do normally lose, you know, 19, maybe up to 25% lean mass loss. Which is a lot, but if you're somebody that's overweight or obese, you probably it's maybe a risk you're worth paying. But when you see like the elderly and sarcopenia and people who maybe aren't prescribed this drug or aren't in those categories, losing 39 to 40% of their lean muscle mass, it's a real concern. And pretty much all of that could be offset with the right tools around using these drugs. So a high protein diet and resistance training.
Yeah, it's a really what point, isn't it, around the habits and the areas that exist in between, isn't it? And what is it's so multi-layered and multifaceted, and you know we've had lots of chats about this previously. It's like it's one tool in the toolbox. So how do you actually help people build the rest of the toolbox? Whatever they're taking the GLPs for. Yeah. Because it could be many different things to the individual. So what would you say? Would you say a PT and a nutritionist is essential alongside?
I think you're bang on, Anna. Like I almost think that anyone curious about this area, one needs to research, two needs to go to their GP and be armed with the right information. And then I think GPs need to be handing this advice over with, you know, here's a dietitian or nutritionist details and here's a PT's details, because it's great and you're going to see weight loss, but it's not all that's going to happen. We need to make sure you maintain your muscle mass. We need to make sure you know how to fuel yourself. I mean, another thing we're seeing is post going off them, the rebound weight gain can be up to 2/3 of what you lost anyway.
What I was curious about, of saying like, if you're on this drug and then you're not doing the right things, like surely it will be, you just gain that weight like that, or get more so than you before.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, you get about 2/3 of the regain weight within 12 months.
Remind me
that can be offset.
Remind me of the biggest remember in The Biggest Loser how
Oh yeah.
watching the show, which is, again, in my opinion, very problematic show, but all these people would go on, lose all this weight and then get off it, and then they would gain all that weight plus some afterwards because they didn't have that healthy lifestyle, like, and those patterns ingrained in them.
Correct. And we also see, because it suppresses appetite regulation, back to those brain stems that we were talking about, it mutes those hunger cues. And so you're almost like no longer intuitive, right? So you come off it and your appetite regulation is so disrupted that it's blunted, and you have this lack of body awareness. You don't know when you're hungry. You don't know when you're full. You haven't actually learnt the cues around that. You haven't learnt to feed yourself. You've just had a suppressed appetite. So I think it is very important that this, for anyone going on it for type 2 diabetes, obesity, weight loss, that it is handed over with a PT and a nutritionist or dietitian.
Maybe like a card to Anni, like a promo card. Like, come to Anni for those bits in between.
100%.
Erica and Jamie on Anni.
100%. Yeah.
I'm so interested in this topic because, and I know we've had conversations outside of this where, from my perspective, I come at it from the conversations that I'm seeing about things like Ozempic and the pressure of now having to be thinner than ever, and like heroin chic kind of being back in fashion and culturally cool again, and watching all these celebrities take Ozempic for a weight loss gain, I would assume, and just seeing people drop so much weight and the implications that has on our society and as women to look a certain way, and the conversations that I'm having like with my female friends about, oh, just going on Ozempic would be so easy, and like let's just do it from a weight loss point of view, and what that's kind of doing for us as a society. Like, I'm so interested in that because all I see is this one side of what Ozempic and the GLP-1 drug is used for, which is weight loss. But like learning more about it and how you've said it can be this like super drug potentially because it has so many benefits to saving so many lives. And I just find that so interesting, the difference between what I've kind of seen and how incredible this drug can be.
What's the story that's not clickbait?
Yeah, totally.
Look, I think it's really interesting what you're saying. I think it is a little bit of a shame. I think it's really interesting time in medicine. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be a really interesting time in medicine to see where these drugs are extrapolated out to. So, they're being studied now for cardiovascular disease. There's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, as well as substance abuse disorders. So nicotine and alcoholism. So they're very much being trialed in lots of different ways. They think that some of the mechanisms of action, and it's yet to be proven, but because of that connection to the brain stem at that point, there's also a lot of anti-inflammatory reflex or inflammatory pathway reflexes there, and they think the drugs might be muting those or increasing those to increase anti-inflammatory pathways. So I mean, that's still all under research, but it's pretty interesting, and I think it's interesting that society latches onto it in like this one area, where it's been around for a diabetes drug for actually quite some time, but suddenly with this weight loss explosion, that's really interesting. But what I would say, and I think is how we define health, and in my clinic, and I'll ask you guys this, in my clinic, people come in and a lot of the time it's to lose a bit of weight. Sometimes it's 5 kilos, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20. And at the end of the consult, I ask every single one of my clients, what is your definition of health? And guess how many times people have attributed weight to health?
50%?
70%. I don't know.
Never. Not once.
Never. Really?
Never.
Yeah.
Not once.
Not one person ever.
Not one has
amazing.
ever said. So when I said, what does healthy mean to you, or what does health mean to you? Even keel of mood, sleeping better, feeling energized, being able to play with my kids without having sore knees or injury. What's another beautiful connection to self, connection to others, moments of joy. Like I get the most beautiful definitions. I've wanted to print them all up on my wall because they're gorgeous, and not one of them has to do with weight. So whilst I appreciate society has kind of like clickbait and head down that pathway, what I'm seeing in the clinic is is it's just a bridge. It's just a tool to get to this feeling, you know, and even the food implications that I ask people to do, it's changes to get to a feeling, and it's so much more than just weight.
Yeah, I love that. I think the whole health as a feeling is such a beautiful message, and being, as you said, like really in tune with your body in terms of energy and that like life force energy that we're feeling and feeling good. And I feel like there's such a stigma with weight where we assume that like a lower weight equals health, or that being of a higher weight is, you know, like in terms of like stigmatization is considered unhealthy. But it's not really the case, is it? There's so many more implications in terms of what health actually really means.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the people starving who are really skinny, they die of infectious diseases that we just don't die of anymore.
Yeah.
So and then on the other end of the scale, you have chronic disease risk if you are overweight or obese. So it is an important factor, but skinny doesn't equal healthy, and neither does obese equal unhealthy. So it's just, I think it's really important that you as an individual, and that's what I do a lot of my counseling, is when people come in and they say all this stuff, you know, I want to lose weight, this is what it is. And then I said, oh, well, what does health mean to you? And they're like, oh yeah, it's not the number on the scale. I'm like, it's really not. Like, we can throw away your scales. I'm not too worried. You know, I want to help you sleep better. I want to help you connect to others. I want to help you experience moments of joy. You know, how gorgeous.
Yeah.
So much more. Yeah.
And also I'm wondering as well, Erica, like, do you find that people just don't know what it feels like to be nourished? Like, in a world where we can eat and consume really whatever we want at any time of day, it's like a convenient world that, you know, in the Western world that we live in, where we can grab pretty much anything we want at any time. But it's not all nourishing food. It doesn't necessarily give nourishment. And is that something that you have to educate people on as well? Like the difference between just consuming food versus feeling like your body is nourished? Because I imagine that's connected to a feeling of joy or happiness or health.
100%. And I think it's really hard. Like, here I am as the expert, and I think you guys would all look like, you guys could probably say, okay, what does a healthy diet look like? And you guys know, you pretty much know, like we know. But for some reason, and I think we've spoken about this before, is like every other animal on the planet knows how to feed itself, except maybe, what did we say? Humans and Labradors, you know, like, you know, I think we've lost our way. And intuitively, I think we know what it is, but it's just the path to get there is so confusing and so convoluted that it's almost impossible to get to that, you know, unprocessed whole food eating. It just seems unattainable, and we've lost that intuition on how to nourish ourselves. Yeah, I would say that a lot of what I do is trying to just get people back to getting in tune with their body, 100% consciously eating, like looking at what they're eating, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I love the word nourishment, because I use that a lot in sex as well, of like nourishing through relationships, nourishing through connection, nourishment through food. Like, I think nourishment is such a holistic view of looking after your body and that health aspect. That's super important, because as soon as you say food for nourishment, like that's a really positive way to look at it, not like food for diet or you know, food for fuel, which I hear a lot of people say. And for me, I'm like, boring. But nourishment is so beautiful and enriching and important, because it's looking after yourself. Like, that's a tool in the toolkit.
Yeah. I talk a lot about nutrient density, you know, like what's the nutrient density of this food? I don't care what the caloric content is, doesn't bother me. You know, what is the nutrient density? You know, has it got lots of, you know, whole foods, lots of fiber, a bit of protein, you know, healthy fats. Look at food as what nutrients it's giving you rather than just the caloric content. And I think that can start to change your whole perspective. Like, oh, I need to make sure I'm feeding myself with some magnesium-rich foods because I'm super stressed at the moment. So I'm going to need more magnesium, or, you know, I need a lot of fiber because, I don't know, my gut health isn't as great at the moment. So they're trying to dial that up. Or, hey, I'm doing a heap of resistance training. I need to make sure I've got protein on my plate within 2 hours. So I think when you start looking at food for its nutrient density over its caloric content, you start going down that health path.
Yeah.
And what I find really interesting, like within a cultural context of Australia, is that we do have an obesity problem, right? Like you gave a really interesting stat that I'd love you to bring up again on what those stats with obesity look like in Australia currently?
Yeah, I heard it described to me. Somebody said if one person out of 100 was failing the class, you'd say that student hasn't studied, right? But when 66 people out of 100 are failing the class, something's not right. That shouldn't be happening. And that's what we faced. The AIHW in 2022 said 66% of all Australians over the age of 18 are overweight or obese.
A huge percentage.
Yeah, 66%. So 66 people out of 100 have a BMI of over 25. So, you know, what is that? And where does that come from? And so, and I think we've spoken about this before, but we see from the 1970s this increase in obesity quite quickly drives up. And that's only been, 75 years or something. How's my maths? 55 years later.
Work that up.
A million years.
And that's that's not enough time to have had any kind of significant genetic changes. We haven't evolved in that time. So what's happened in those 55 odd years for these 66 out of 100 people to kind of be not passing the test, let's put it that way. And then on the same hand, well, we always have had people on a spectrum genetically, and actually weight or body composition is inheritable. It is only inheritable more by height. Height is more inheritable than body weight, but it's really highly inheritable. So we've already have this spectrum over the course of many millennia where you have people that are maybe more thrifty and can hold on to their caloric content better, and then the people who are probably leaner and burn through their calories. And that was really important. And now what we've seen is this extrapolation of those thrifty genes. Everyone's kind of moved more that way. But it's all moved so quickly. And so how is that possible? On one hand, it's true that it's very genetically inheritable. And on the other hand, it's true that it's happened in such a small amount of time that, what's happened. And how I would describe it is it's a little bit of epigenetics at play, which means our genes have loaded the gun. And we might be someone who's genetically more predisposed to have a thrifty gene and hold on to caloric content better. And our environment has pulled the trigger. And that's what I would say. So it's probably a little bit of both at play.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like it's actually mind-boggling. I hear that statistic and you almost can't believe it. And you think, well, yeah, I guess it makes so much sense in so many ways, and then no sense in other ways, as you say, in such a short period of time to have that and to not have a solution as to why that's occurring.
Yes.
It's quite mind-boggling, isn't it?
I mean, there's so many theories out there.
Yeah.
You guys even listed some, like, in the Western world, calories are relatively cheap to come by. It's available you can anywhere. You don't even have to walk out the door anymore. We get ultra processed foods. Is it that? There's so many theories, and the reality is you can't do a population study because you can't just replicate the world and test it. So
that would be a terrifying thing.
Let's find some more billions of people.
Correct.
Interesting. I think, and coming back to that, food is it's health isn't about it's not about being deprived of things. It's not built on deprivation. It's built on nourishment, and the importance of really coming back to that. And I guess that's why, Annie is such an amazing thing, because if we're looking at how do people get these new tools in their toolkit of kind of working through an issue where maybe there is an obesity problem, or, maybe people don't know how to feed themselves with nourishment, and how good Annie is in terms of getting access to help. I've had a session with you, Erica, as a nutritionist, and it was amazing. It was so easy to use that and get those little tips of what I can do to change those little patterns in my day to make myself feel better and feel more energetic and look after my body better.
Oh, well, that's why we created it, Jamie.
Totally, it's great.
Thanks for the setup. No.
It is awesome. It is awesome.
No, but joking aside, that's it, right? Everything, as humans, we're complicated creatures. We're multi-layered, and we don't always know what it is that we need, but sometimes we know that we don't feel as good as what we could. And that, I think, is where you know, that is where something like Anni does come in, is we can help those bits in between, or we can help with the discovery of the area that you might not know about or feel confident in. Like even in your space, Jamie, like, you know, how many people in the world are suffering from loneliness and disconnection and trying to find that that way to feel part of the world and find their community again, which is another huge area, huge problem.
Huge. Loneliness
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah.
1 out of 4 Australians have said that they feel loneliness, and especially like out of the pandemic as well. And being, but like I feel like people are feeling lonelier than ever.
Yeah, and
So-
people don't know where to go. Yeah, they don't know what to do or how to turn to or how to solve that. And I think that's I mean, we should do a topic on that, Jamie. That's we should. But it's a really interesting thing in the context of Anni. It's like, well, yeah, you can. I mean, people might get put off thinking they're talking to a sexologist, but a sexologist is not just about sex. You know, nutrition's not just about weight. Like it's about being a human, and it's multi-layered and
it's so nuanced.
It's so nuanced.
It's so nuanced, and it comes back to how do you define health? And quite often health comes across both ways, like it's body confidence as well as this joy and this connection, and it's so many other things that play into it. It's not just nutrition, and it's not just self-confidence. There's so many aspects to it, and it's just the little things, right? But I think what Anni does really well is it's a judgment-free space, and I hope that's what people can understand with this today. You know, whether you're on GLP-1s or not, it doesn't concern us. What we're working towards is what is your definition of health, and how can we help you get there, and what tools do you have in your toolbox that we can help build upon. And GLP might be one tool, because you do have a BMI of over 27 and a risk of cardiovascular disease. Fine. But how can we help make sure that you get the most out of that you don't get the rebound weight, that you are strong, that when you come off it, you have the body confidence that you needed in the first place, like all of that stuff.
Yeah. And feel good. I think that's the most important thing. Like, how can you feel good?
Feel good.
Where you're at in your life is just a bunch of different seasons, and sometimes they look differently. And it's like, how do you feel good and okay with yourself, and show yourself that self-love, and really look after your health as a number one priority always, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tool for life, isn't it? That toolbox. It's a tool. It's a building block for life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it keeps growing, right? I don't think you ever stop learning. I think you should never stop learning. Is probably what I
agree with that. You should never stop learning, and you should never stop tuning into yourself and building that relationship of what it is that you need, and
be curious.
So, and be curious. Yeah. Don't stagnate.
Total divergence. But I was swimming the other day. I was in the change room, and you know, there are all these old little nanas in there, and they're all nude, you know, because they don't give two hoots.
They don't care anymore.
They don't.
They've gone through enough. They've gone through a war.
They could not give two hoots. And these little kids are in there, and they're like,
I love that though.
They couldn't care less. They're just letting these kids watch them. They're like, whatever. Just fabulous. Talk about body confidence.
Right?
They're like,
Right. That's why I love Europe so much, because I would go to these European beaches, and there's just these like older women, like they've obviously been so sunken, they're like leathery, they're big, they've got booties, and they're just out there in a thong or like nothing at all. And they're just having the best time.
Happy as anything. I know. And then you get I know. And then you get the young, like 20-year-olds that are too scared to take their towel off, and it's like, come on, you're only 20 once. Go have fun. So funny. I love that.
It is funny.
Really funny. That's the definition of health. Hey, those nanas in the change room.
100%. Still swimming, still chatting. Like, for me, that's healthy. You know, if you're still ocean swimming at 80, you're doing something right.
You're doing something right. Great community, social connection, all the rest of it. Yeah, it's awesome.
Love it.
Good. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I think we've kind of covered everything. Is there anything you want to say? Is there any other points that we haven't kind of made on GLP-1 that you want to bring, or do you think we've kind of covered everything?
The only thing is, if people are curious on, you know, what they like, the brand names, and then what they're prescribed for. So the semaglutides, that's your Ozempic, which is prescribed for type 2 diabetes. and it is listed on the PBS in Australia for type 2 diabetes. So that's what it can be prescribed for on label. Then Wegovy has become under, like, it's the same as Ozempic. It's the same. It's just the weight loss version, and that is for chronic weight management, and that's still under TGA approval. But it's here in Australia and in Kent, so it's not on the PBS, but you can still be prescribed it for weight loss. So that's the semaglutides, and then you have the tirzepatides. So people might have heard the brand name Mounjaro. That's in Australia. It's dual action. So while the Ozempic and Wegovy work on just GLP-1 agonists, Mounjaro is dual acting. So it has the GLP-1 bit, which they all do, but it also has this GIP bit, GIP, and that acts on another receptor. And what we're seeing is not only more weight loss with the Mounjaros, but less of the like nausea, and which you see commonly with the semaglutides. So that's prescribed for diabetes, and then they're going to be bringing out a weight loss version of that for chronic weight management. It's going to be called Zepbound, but I don't think that's here in Australia yet. And then there in study is a triple action, if you can believe it, which has the GLP-1, it has the GIP, and then it's also got a glucagon peptide added to it. And with that, you're seeing something like 24% weight loss, but that's very much still being studied. And all I would say that any of these, you know, the weight loss and keeping it off improves exponentially if you make sure that you do diet and lifestyle changes. So I think on the Mounjaro, your average weight loss is around 21%, and you can jump that up to 26% if you include diet and lifestyle changes.
Yeah,
which is pretty wild.
And do they have any stats on, is it so more successful, did you say, in keeping the weight off if you actually have
I don't know if that's been studied as much.
Yeah.
Definitely you can mitigate the amount, like increase body fat loss and lean muscle mass or lean mass retained. Yeah. So that, yes, you can, but the drug companies will be working on iterations of these drugs that make sure in the future, it'd be interesting to see, but where you don't lose that lean body mass. But absolutely integrating diet and lifestyle changes, especially resistance training and increasing protein intake, reduces the amount of lean body mass. So like I said, normally you would expect like 25%. And with these drugs, you're seeing closer to 40% of the weight being lost being lean mass. And yes, with diet and lifestyle changes, you can mitigate that right down.
Yeah. Because we all need to be able to have strong muscles, don't
we? Yeah, and that's what comes down to weight doesn't equal health, right? Like it's really important to have a huge amount of lean muscle mass and strong bones coming into the years, 60 plus. We know that that's paramount for longevity. We know that that's for fall prevention. We know that that's for mobility, so that's not a weight thing. That's a health thing.
That's those grannies in the change room up there.
Correct.
That's
muscles, exactly.
You want to have those muscles. That body confidence and those muscles.
100%. Give me what they've got.